So just bear with us for a minute.
Yeah, we're gonna wait till on the hour. She's getting it ready right now. So, well, everybody just stay tuned, and we'll be with you in just a few minutes.
Hi, Andy. How you doing, buddy? Mhm. Are you enjoying the this? Oh no, can you hear me? No, I'm talking to Andrew from the USATH. He's in Denmark right now.
All right, we can get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final module that we'll be doing. Very excited once again to have participants stick with this through the weekend. Thank you everyone for being on the call today. And with that, I will pass it over to Craig for the first lecture in the final module, which is developing tactical skills.
Hi, everyone. Yes, thank you for sticking through this. We've come a long way with where we began and went through everything. And so I just want to say how much we appreciate you staying focused and being part of this process. This is an important step for us as we begin a better, more defined coaching education program in the United States and in the neighboring communities of North America. So this is an important time for us. I just want to say that I'm very excited for this next lecture. This next lecture continues the lecture that began the second module yesterday, which was the development process as a player. And for us, we're now looking at the development process as a team, applying the same information that we learned about individual development into group development. A note about scheduling before I start. We had scheduled 2 breakout rooms and had planned to have them separate, but with our realigning and staying in the main webinar, I will shorten my modified developmental pathway discussion and have it at the very end of this. I have it in 3 concise slides, and I will end it there after this presentation, and then we will turn over to Julio. And so now I'm going to start talking about the development process as a team. As we move forward, I think we need to figure out how to use our computers. I've only been at this for 14 hours. We have to look back and see where we are. And so currently in the last module, we focused on gameplay and game understanding. We talked about understanding the game as a coach from the gameplay perspective. And then we talked about tactics in attack and counterattack, and then tactics in defense and retreat with my colleague Julio. Yesterday, we covered a lot of ground. We covered all the joint technical skills, the technical skills and rudimentary skills. We covered the physical and psychological aspects of the individual. And then we started with tactical skills and some game understanding. And now we're really going to build this last module on developing tactical skills in your players and your teams and your programs. Presently, I look at this pyramid and we are close. Lecture 11 that follows this lecture, or lecture 11 is the application of what you're about to learn right now. So both are intertwined and important. So as we begin, I want to discuss one area that's very important to understand, and that's the 5 factors of team development. And these 5 factors are independent of any particular sport and are more general and broad in application. The 5 factors are staff. These factors individually include and group knowledge, history, personality, commitment, pedigree, knowledge of the game, history of experiences in the game, and history of coaching the game, personality. Every team has a unique personality, and a lot of times, as Christian talked about, it's not just preference that Christian and Robert want their players to play that way. It reflects something about their personality, something about their knowledge of the game. And then it's commitment. We're talking about development, and you have been very committed. I see as more people are coming on, you've been very committed to the process this weekend following this symposium. It's a very important symposium. It's a lot of information. It's the overview of all coaching education in the sport, and so it's very important. So commitment matters, and sometimes a lesser commitment is reflective of a level of play. So maybe it's a recreational team, and that's the type of commitment you need. And then there's pedigree, and pedigree means not just the personal qualifications, but also what school of handball do they come out of, or what influences have they had. And so pedigree is a broader term, but it's important for considering coaching staff. And then you have the players, and the players' age matters. Is this a cadet group? Is this middle schoolers? Is this a youth group? Is this high schoolers? Is this a junior group? Is it college, or is it an adult, or is it mixed? Is it little kids, or is it old men? Is it? And so it's understanding the age is a big component. Experience of the players. Are they new players? Are they developed players? Are they mixed players? Are they talented players? Are they recreational players? Temperament goes a long way into developing teams. Temperament of the players. Are they responsive to your practice tasks? Are they responsive to their teammates? Are they supportive? Are they degrading? And it's important to understand temperament and how to place that within it. Commitment also from your players is reflective. You can only go as far, as I spoke about in this lecture for individual, those middling phases, the manipulation, trial and error, and mastery is all about the commitment of the individual player or a group of players. In this case, what we're going to talk about today. And then quality. What is the quality of the players? That means, how do they play now? Where are they at in their present development? This is an important understanding this is an important thing to understand in the development of players. And then we have training, quantity, volume, frequency. This is important. Is the quantity, and it's supposed to have a fourth that's quality, and I'm omitting it, but put it in your head. Quality also. Quantity, quality, volume, frequency. Quantity of practice is a week. The volume of practice is a season. The frequency, is it every other day, or do you do 3 days in a row? Is it, and so that matters. Competition governs everything. Everything we talk about going in the next, in this lecture and in forward is all about competition. What's the type of competition? Is it club recreational? Is it club novice? Is it club developmental? Or is it club elite? Is it national team? What nation? It all matters. And then it's quantity and frequency of competition. It's hugely, Christian said it, the national team players need high level competition, and they need a lot of it. And I would say for the club level players, they need more consistent competition than they need sporadic large competitions. I think this is something we need to address in the United States, and I'm not afraid to say that out loud right here and right now. We need to have localized, which I talked about in my breakout room on getting started in team handball. We need more players, more localized, regular competition. That's how you build a proper foundation and grow the sport and welcome in people from all sorts of socioeconomic backgrounds, all sorts of life circumstances. Right now, we have a system where our competition, you have to be able to pay $800 a weekend to go play because you got to fly, you have to stay in hotels, and you have to eat out. But a high schooler can't do that. College students certainly can't. And then there's the intangibles. And this is something that we're going to talk about today and then apply it to the breakout room that immediately follows in mine, which is core values and culture. Everything within the organization or in a club or on a team. Now you can have a club can have culture and value, and a team could have a different one, but core values and culture really drives everything you do. If it's recreational, it's enjoyment, it's fun, and every decision that's made should be focused on that culture. Is it a culture of excellence? Is it a culture of leisure? It all depends on those defining principles, and that's how your team will develop, or in some cases develop slowly, but it's okay because it's recreational. You're supposed to have fun. In the real world, you have an ideal staff for a team. My friends in Europe, if you're out there and watching this right now, I'm so jealous of you. I'll tell you the funny story of my first experience of lecturing at the World Championships in Qatar in 2015. And I became buddies with Borat Machik, the coach of Iran. And we would have coffee every day. And he would tell me, you've made it in the sport as a coach when you have a goalkeeping coach. He's like that. For him, that's like the distinction, the line of when you have an ideal staff, you have deferred. And on the national team, sometimes we have it, sometimes we don't. Our men's team is going with a more robust staff, which we don't usually have. But an ideal staff would have a head coach, an assistant coach, a strength and conditioning coach, a goalkeeping coach, and then an athletic trainer. Now, each of these people have a responsibility. And if you were to overlap each of these development pyramids, you would see that every category is covered. And you have to realize that the ideal staff does not exist in this part of the world. And I have to play roles. I have to order tickets. There's nothing that drives me more crazy than having to buy 32 tickets to go to Sweden to bring 2 national teams to the Partille Cup. It's an endless endeavor, and it totally drains me from what I love to do, which is coaching. I'm not a travel agent, but I have to play it. That's why in the United States, the reality is this: one coach to play all 5 roles. And often that coach is in a situation like many of you. That coach comes to us and doesn't know, wants to start, but has a sense that they want to start something or want to pursue something, but they don't really know. And then the first thing they encounter is all the administrative stuff, and they quit. Well, we're here this weekend to try to support your development, to fill in and darken your triangles, so that when you go out on the court, when COVID's over and we all are back to training and developing and playing, that we look back and say, you were right. Not me being right, but like the person who told me and the person that's telling you that it's right. This matters. These areas matter. I'm doing better. And it's important. The staff reality is you have to cover every function. You have to teach game understanding. You have to tape ankles. The ankle taping thing was the worst, because I was in the middle of a game without a trainer in the national team, and I had to tape an ankle during an international game. That's the reality in the United States. I know my friends in Europe laugh at that. They crack up at our stories. I sat in a class for the master licensing, and when they were going through periodic cycles and discussing it, and I said, what would you do if you had to play? How do you find a rest schedule for 5 games in 2 days? The examiner looked at me and was just like, I don't have any answer for that. That's unconscionable. But that's our reality. 5 games in 2 days in the United States. How do we properly develop for it? And we're underserved as it is. So as we go forward, I want us to think about the ideal team. The ideal team it's important to understand ideals, because that helps us understand where we need to go. If I had the ideal team, I would have, and if you attended my first lecture, about the development process, you understand I've got 2 players in mastery. I have 2 players that are likely in decline, but were in mastery. I have 2 players that are at a high plateau, another at a high plateau, probably a role player. And then I have 2 new players, one completely new, another that's in the manipulation phase of handball, but I'm developing. And so it's important to understand your team, but this would be an ideal team because you have the future coming in and developing with a group that can then pass that legacy on. Something I talked about with the woman from Penn State. That's important, this legacy thing. And so if you had an ideal team, I mean, the ideal team is what France has, and it would be all of these players 35 deep for each age group, but we don't have that here. I'm talking reality. And so when we look at our teams, we have to look at the reality here in the developing handball world. Often we might have, if we're lucky, one really experienced player. We might have 2 players that reached a high plateau, but are kind of fixed. And then we have a lot of role players. We have people that are just starting. We have people that are in the manipulation phase and may quit. We just don't know who we're going to develop. You know, there's so many times I've put effort into people and watch them walk away. And sometimes I'm like thankful. I'm like, their core values and their expectations didn't meet ours, and it's a good thing. But there's other times you put a lot of effort into it and they walk away. There's other players you develop for a long time. I'm going to talk about Tean right now, the young man that I was talking about with in the sidearm during the technical skills and attack, when I was showing you his development of the sidearm. Tean could be a star player despite anthropometric limitations in any league. He's got that thing. He is a undersized player who played for the team that lost the state championship in football in the United States, and he scored 36 touchdowns on 100 runs as a football player. Well, Tegan's nearly fully developed. He was almost at the high level plateau of synergy when he went and focused on football, you know, and it's heartbreaking for me. It's one of those things that you look back on, and I did the right thing and I put my effort into it, and I'm hopeful, and I think there's promise that someday he'll come back. And like riding a bike, he's been developed. He's had the experience, you know, he's been developed and then been tested and then did well at all levels. And so but that's the cost of developing in the United States or in Canada. We lose the players often that we covet the most because they are stars in other sports. But it's important for me to develop as a coach to know how to coach a Tegan. It's important for me and you as a coach to walk into a gym, see the kid who's playing basketball the best, and convince that kid to come try out for handball. If you can't do that, you shouldn't be a national team coach. I fully believe that. Anybody that's worked for me as a staff member knows I say this to everybody: develop your shtick, but you got to do it confidently, and you got to walk in, see the kid playing it the best. Because Tegan was that kid. I did a test program at his middle school, and I showed up with the trainer balls, and I handed him a trainer ball, and Tegan went and dunked it on a regulation hoop. And I said to his teacher, I said, "Oh, that's exciting." He goes, "You'll never get him." And it was like, my little masterful like mind was like, "No way, I'm not taking no." And I went and talked with him, and I talked to his friends, and I got a group of them to come out. And the group of them, 5 of them, played for a long time. Each of them have now gone on. Ty, the other boy, he's got a Division I football scholarship. JT's now a kicker in football and might end up going pro. I mean, I got this large group of kids, the friends group, to come out. But the development process, the team reality, means that we're going to have players completely mixed. And within that group, I have to fit in kids that have borderline recreational developmental desires for the sport. They're still experimenting. They never really played a sport, or they weren't really good at a sport, and they come out. And in the developing world, you need them all. I need players to support the program and to keep coming back. And the other important thing is we're not just developing players. We're developing future referees. We're developing future coaches. We're developing future supporters of the sport, and we're developing fans of the sport. That's the irony and the the infamy of what we're trying to do in the developing world. Is we need referees, we need coaches, we need supporters, and we need fans. We need people to go get a PhD and become a banker and then say, you know what, I love this sport so much, I want to give money to it. And that's what we're doing here. We're creating a following for a sport, and it begins with educating you to be better at what you do so we can all benefit. And so understanding the different types of teams we talked about, I'm going to skip this frame. And then we have to look at the time of the development process. So we're developing teams. So we have this mix of group of kids in a club team or adults, some recreational, some developmental, some former elite. And we look at the process and we say, where do we begin? Well, we have to break down the schedule into two forms. The first is in season, the second is out of season. For a club team that's recreational, who cares about you don't have to focus anything. If you're a more serious club, you have to focus on the important parts. So you have early preseason, late, which is about preparation. You have late preseason, which is about development. You have in season, which is about refinement and performance. We talked about these things. Refinement is that right before the high plateau is that moment. Refinement is that thing you do to bring it all together. And we also talked about decline. And when things decline, you need refinement to come back to the high plateau. And then you have the non-playing season, which is recovery. In Open Championship, when those teams are done in May in the United States, they don't talk about handball or look at handball or think about handball until the fall. But in the elite, they go to the games, they talk, they think it through the summer, and they start plotting, in June already, and it ended in May. And so it's very important to understand the season. And so remember, we're coming back. And for those of you who are new to this, when we're talking about the focus here, we're talking about the dark blue is the main focus. The light blue is the support of that focus. And the gray is something you don't consider, or it by accident is developed, but it's not part of your strategic plan. So in the early preseason for the club teams, it's really important, the physical and psychological. Christian talks to me and he says, it's 6 weeks. And so that's Division 2 in France, but here we're not going to have 6 weeks. We likely have an early preseason of 2 to 3 weeks, 2 weeks. And it's not going to be, it's going to be a lot of people doing it on their own, but you must have the physical and psychological apparatus in place to begin the season. And so it associates loosely with the other areas, but it's not focused on gameplay, what we were talking about. Then you have the late preseason. This is the time before you come into the season. You haven't had your first game yet. You're starting to get into form. Something we talked about yesterday was synergy. You're starting to develop some synergy. And how do you develop synergy? You have to focus on joint technical skills and small group collaboration. How do you do that? You focus on technical skills and tactical skills. Hold on, my dog. Hold on one second. I just had to tell my kids to shut the dog up. Sorry. So in late preseason, you're focused on joint technical skills, small collaboration, technical skills, and tactical skills. Everything else now is coming into place. You have game understanding, physical, rudimentary, techno-tactical, and gameplay. Everything's starting to come together. You need to start to come together as the season starts, but you never start the season in peak form. Peak form, that high plateau, comes after a couple games and you go through the morpho cycle of it and you start to understand it. Then you have the club team process in season. Okay, now we're focused on gameplay and techno-tactical synergy, and everything else is supporting that. You can't be in the in between cycles of games and tournaments and be fully focused on physical and psychological. Rudimentary skills are out the door at this point. So you're really focused on all the supporting factors of techno-tactical synergy and gameplay. This is what it's about. And then you come to the non-playing season. The season ends. What are you focused on? Well, physical and psychological, but it's not in development. It's in also recovery, allowing the body and the mind to decline, to rest. Handball is a stressful sport. Developing in the sport is stressful on athletes. It's very important to have a substantial period of rest. I'll be interested to see in the NBA what happens going forward this season, with one season just ending for some, one season having been over since January for others, and how that relates to injuries and coming to peak form in a new season. Because never before has this happened in the NBA, where some teams just played 40, 50 games at the end of the season just a little bit ago, and they're already starting a new season. And some teams have been off for 6 months. That's going to be an interesting, I guarantee there'll be a lot of science studies written about what they can find. I mean, COVID's a great experiment. The great restart after it will be interesting also, and you have to consider that. But the non-playing season, it's about physical recovery and about an athlete can work on rudimentary technical skills, but in that manipulation phase. Remember, we talked about it. And the first phase is the introductory phase. The middle phase belongs to the athlete manipulation. Well, they can go off on their own and rudimentary skills and technical skills and game understanding. Watch tape, watch games, start to think about handball. Applying the 4 domains of athlete development is important: technical, tactical, physical, and psychological. In early preseason, technical evaluation of all previously introduced skills is very important. Focus on development of foundational skills. Introduce new progressive skills. Late preseason, technical development is very important. Focus on performance. Introduce new advanced skills. And then in the season, technical performance is very important. Focus on performance of foundational and progressive skills and development of advanced skills. And then it's recovery and decline for technical skills. Remember what we talked about last time. There always is decline. Domain 2, group training for club team tactical development, part 1. Early preseason for tactical, it's gone. The only thing you should play is games focused on building the physical apparatus that prepares them for what you're about to do, but it doesn't hinder their physical development. At that cycle. Late preseason, now we're looking at techno-tactical skills because we need the synergy to happen. We need the 2 pyramid bases to come together so you have the synergy. And if you're not focused on that right before the season begins, you're going to be in trouble. Here you use basic game form, standard game form. You're starting to tie the concepts to the context to the game itself. I mean, we have to think about that. There's concepts. This is the idea. Remember, we talked about the micro phases of attack, and so those objects of the game are the concepts. And then the context is within certain aspects of the game, and then to the game itself with basic game forms and standard game forms. Then you go to the tactical, or you go from tactical to season. Now tactical performance is the focus. Performance of new tactical concepts. New tactical concepts that were introduced in the preseason need to be performed now. And tactical games, small-sided games, these all work to develop those aspects. And then you go to the non-playing season and recovery and decline. Come back again of all tactical skills, which doesn't mean you're never going to recover it. It just means there's a natural decline. Jared from the USOPC had a detailed chart of all of the degradations and the days. So he said if you took, 2 weeks off from the 40 and you ran a 4.9, you'd likely be at a 5.1 2 weeks later. Not because it's because you didn't train. Decline. It just happens. To stay in that peak form is hard. Then you have group training for physical development, conditioning and coordination early preseason. Conditioning and coordination development should be incorporated into all practice tasks now. So you go from focusing specifically on those 2, coordination and that, to developing them in game context and using them to support it. And then then there's the morphocycle dictates everything afterwards in the season. It should. And if this is our ideal goal to get to in the United States, to have regular weekly competition during the season, it's important to know that this is what we need to get to. The morphocycle right now when I was in my 30s and 40s and would play a tournament with 5 games, I mean, there was a 2-week rest cycle where I didn't want to do anything. I'd have pivot elbow, my knees and my elbows would be so, it didn't matter if I wore pads or what. And that cycle is brutal in the United States, but you have to understand that of your athletes and prepare for it. Then there's psychological development. Early preseason, it's really about game-based problem solving in high activity, non-contextual exercises with team bonding and recovery activities that promote unit cohesion. You're bringing the unit together, and you can do it with psychological tools both on the court and outside of the court domain. And usually this is important, this team bonding, but it doesn't mean go hang out and go to a bar. It means team bonding. It means having specific things for them to do. Then problem solving and decision making in late preseason in high activity contextual exercises. It's a highly, you need to stress them in late preseason. You need to get the central nervous system activated in such a way so it can, all the stimulation, both internal and external, is starting to be like game-like conditions. Team bonding and recovery activities are important to lower the threshold, and especially during the season, because for psychological, the morphocycle between the games is important. You have this high energy, high emotional load that needs to be the day after. There shouldn't be stress in practice. There shouldn't be problem solving. They just need to rest. And then non-sporting social activities for the team that aren't really guided. They just need to go away. Go have fun, do whatever that players do, which is, whatever. And then we have recovery and decline and game study. The development for process for national teams is different. It's different. It's someone asked the question about how do you do it, develop to Christian, how do you develop with limited time? And this is what we're going to talk about, but you have to understand a selection camp. And so if you're a national team player watching right now, you need to understand this. Selection camp is for evaluation. I'm not going to teach you much. I may introduce a concept to see how you handle new material, but it's not because I want to see how you do it. I want to see how you respond to it. It's very important. General training camp is about development. So we've taken the group and narrowed it down to a select group. From this select group, we have to come together, and that's the development part of a general training camp. Christian and I are trying to plan something for the women's national team and the whole program this summer, hopefully, with the vaccine, so we can come back together and work on the concepts we need to know and the activities we need to perform. And then there's pre-competition camp. This is the developmental stage between refinement and performance, if you remember. Between refinement and high plateau. Pre-competition camp means that these players go away. They go and their coach who doesn't like speed and likes a slow game plan they come back to me, and all of a sudden I'm running full bore practices and they're not prepared. Well, I need to refine them in such a way to get them back on board for the national team perspective. But for players in the pool, the pre-competition camp is huge because it's fully focused on performance, and then on preparing for performance, which is competition. And the benefits for us in the national team system is that because our system is so clearly defined, we have international weeks, we have international competitions, we have a pre-competition camp, and we have a world championships. We went to Portugal. We went to Portugal for our pre-competition camp for the world championships. We went to Portugal for a 7-day camp with the US junior national team. On our first day of arrival, we played Argentina and lost by 30 or something. But Argentina was on day 30 of their pre-competition camp. We met them at the end of the tournament and only lost by a few goals. I mean, think about that. And we lost several of our best players to go play with the senior national team at the Pan Am Games. This is important to understand. This is difficult stuff. This preparing a team with the limited resources that we have. Christian talked about it: time, money, access. We have limited time, limited money, and limited access with our athletes. We have to do the best with what we have, and understanding how they work is important. For a national team selection camp, fully focused on the blue, the dark blue, with supporting from game understanding, gameplay. But I'm evaluating you on your technical skills, your synergy, your small group collaborations. I'm seeing which players work. Remember, I talked about before how some players can be a certain way, but in combination with another player, they're greater than their gameplay alone. And so you need to see that at an evaluation camp. You need to see for yourself what's the chemistry, what's their fatigue. At the general training camp, you now are focused again on this idea of technical skills, joint technical skills, small group collaboration, tactical skills, building the pinnacle of the technical pyramid, and building the pinnacle of the tactical pyramid is essential for a general training camp. They may or may not get to synergy, but you need to get them close because they need to get a sense of what it is. And then you have pre-competition. Your focus here. Now, again, you're focused on gameplay. Again, your obsession with gameplay. And now there's nothing you can develop at this point. If I show up 6 days before a tournament, only thing I can develop is in my understanding of my players and where they're presently at and put them in the best combination possible. I can't teach you a better split step in 6 days that you can then perform in competition. And so pre-competition, you're focused on gameplay, you're focused on setting them up, whatever their synergy is. Maybe they're 3 levels down in gameplay, but putting them in to succeed at that level in certain moments is important. And then you have competition. And now it's your focus is everything is gameplay. And everything else is subsidiary and supportive of it. There's no talk of rudimentary skills, technical skills, tactical skills. As the head coach, the trainer deals with injury prevention and injury maintenance. The strength and conditioning coach, if we have one with us, is on the, and psychological coach is working to heal the athletes' minds and bodies or prepare them. But I'm focused on gameplay. I'm solely focused. And now we apply it to the domain of technical, tactical, physical, and psychological. Now, I've already talked about this. So selection camp is evaluation. And I'm not going to go into details. This is a really detailed chart. If you want to go back and watch the footage again and understand it. But basically, I expect all senior national team players to show up at a selection camp and be in evaluation stage of their skills. Youth national team, we have concepts and tactics that for the women's program that we begin in the youth national team. And that's when we introduce them. And for some of them, it'll be their first time seeing these. And so it's important that it's introduction for you. The next time they come as a junior, it's now development of what was introduced before. And so you have to have a gradated expectation of it, but it's important nonetheless for national team development. And then you go through all of this, but performance of all level appropriate skills is what's important for competition. My youth girls won their last 3 games and took 5th in their first tournament. They were 3 or 4 years younger than the age of their opponents. In their last game, they won by 25 goals against Puerto Rico. It was a great game we played, but we had so many errors, but they're expected errors. It was their first time. For many of them, they didn't even know how to do a timeout in international play. They didn't know it was a new thing for them. And so for us, it's important to understand that competition of level appropriate skills is always the end game, or performance of them is the end game of all that we do. And it's the same with tactical. Again, it's evaluation, but the expectation is to find whether you're youth, junior, or a senior national team player or an aspiring player in that, you need to understand what are the skills that are expected of you, what are the skills you're supposed to be developing, and what are the skills you haven't been introduced to yet. If you don't understand that, you'll never make a team. I'm just sorry, it's honest. And then you go to psychological, or you go physical. Sorry, I skipped a slide. Physical, it's the same thing. I'm going to go through these fast. And then psychological. Psychological is important for team bonding in national team more so than in a club. In the national team, you are literally with these people for 16, 20 days. The guys, we were like 24 days in Portugal and Spain for the World Championships. Psychological aspects are important. Mentoring, team building, but not just that, problem resolution. I mean, you're resolving problems all the time, free time, isolation. Everybody needs to get away. And so psychological is important for national team development, but it begins with non-contextual exercises and moves to context. And then it's gameplay activities for psychological. And then they should, you're right before competition, the psychological load should reflect the load they're going to experience in the games themselves. If you don't prepare them for that psychologically, you're going to be doomed on the court because it's high stress and international. And to be honest, as a coach, my first international game, I was like, how do you coach? The junior national team was going back and forth so fast, so many possessions. I mean, it was like 40% more possessions, attacks than a normal game, simply because they just don't stop running. There's no fatigue. And then things to consider. The staff must perform all the necessary team roles, no matter the size or the background. Players are a mix of skills and personalities, and it's the coach's job to understand where they are in their development and how to get them where they need to be for the team. The greatest limiting factor on team development is quality and frequency of training and competition. Listen to what I am saying. The greatest limiting factor on team development is quality and frequency of training and competition. There's very few coaches in the United States who walk into there's very few coaches of teams in the United States. It's usually a player, first of all. Second of all, there's very few coaches who walk in with a practice plan in hand or in phone. That's why I brought August from XPS today. Important discussion about improving your game as a coach. If you walk in and improvise a practice, you have failed them from the start, and you should not be coaching. That's harsh, but it's true. It's true. Think about where you have to evaluate, you have to construct, and you have to implement practice plans. You have to evaluate the players, you have to construct the practice plan, and then you have to implement it. You have to run it. And then revise it when you realize, oh, that didn't work so well. They're already past that. Team culture and core values will answer all difficult questions. In team development, team culture and core values will all answer all difficult questions. And I'm going to pose 3 of them in just a second. I'm going to pose 3 difficult questions. Intangibles in team development are, again, core values and culture. Core value, they're intangibles. The core values and culture will dictate what you do and how you do it. And it will be reflected in not just performance, but behavior. If you understand, it'll be reflected in performance and behavior. So I'm going to step immediately into my next. I seem to have lost a slide, but it's okay. I'll finish it. So I'm gonna go immediately into this before we go into any Q&A for this. So modified developmental pathways. What does this mean? This means that the players are not in the same place as the club or team. It means that someone walks in the door, we're mid practice, we look over, what do we do? They want to play. They want to learn. They saw it on the Olympics. They love it. Oh, it's great. I could be world champion. And they walk in the door. What do you do? Well, I have a philosophy. Adding new players to your existing club or developed program is important for the growth of the sport. We must be inclusive no matter what. We don't have time to say no to, or we don't have the ability to say no to people, and we have to figure out what to do. The key factor is understanding their athletic DNA is important to successfully onboarding new players. This means understanding their age, their athletic profile, and their previous sporting experience. I have a 43-year-old who is overweight, smokes, and previous sporting experience, played handball in Europe for 12 years. I laugh because I didn't just pull that out of thin air. That's actually something that I've heard many times. Still smokes, but wants to play handball again. Loved it as a kid, played high level, second division in Germany, but now wants to come back. Or a 17-year-old, 6'6", 212-pounder who is currently a Division I football recruit. These things matter. Equally important is understanding their goals and expectations, to have fun, to learn a new sport, to develop as a new player, to make a national team. Because you cannot cut corners with development. A coach needs to have a game plan in place that meets 2 requirements. Do not disrupt the development of the team, and develop the new player with a proper foundation. These are hard acts to balance. Do not disrupt the development of the team at any cost. Develop the new player with a proper foundation. Those are the keys to these modified developmental pathways. I'm not going to go into depth on this, but I've got all sorts of notes I could tell you on this. My methodology is this for developing players. Understand the 3 fundamental conflicts when new players come to existing clubs. This means talented new players to novice or developmental teams. This can be a destroyer. It doesn't seem like it, but it can be a destroyer. We can lose players this way. Talented player to an elite team, a talented new player, totally raw, coming to an elite team. Also, another way to ruin players. I've seen it here. And then novice player to developmental team. These are important considerations that affect the team, the entire team, and its development. You need to designate staff or players to focus on new players. I'm going to say that again. Designate staff or players to focus on new players. I'm a head coach. If my focus is on the team, I can't focus on the new guy that walked in, but I need to have a plan in place for someone to disconnect from the practice and say, maybe it's a veteran player, and say, I'm in charge of new players. Introduce themselves, play around, manipulate. This is the presentation manipulation phase, the earliest phases of handball. And sometimes if we don't have someone step out off the court and interact with that person, we lose them forever. Develop a questionnaire for new players that focuses on the previously mentioned factors. This is important. You need to know. And then you need to evaluate the new player as an athlete and evaluate the new player as a team handball player. This doesn't mean you have to like get out your stopwatch and go run a 40 for me. This means that I need to look at them, get them into a game context situation and see them how they react to a team sport. Sometimes someone's like, I was a former Olympic athlete. I was a swimmer, and they don't have an invasion game background, and it's important. And then you need to design a parallel plan to develop new players concurrently to the team. This is the pathway. This is the modified pathway. It's concurrent. The team keeps going, but you're working on how to bring that person in and giving the new player level appropriate opportunities to incorporate themselves with the team. Remember, we cannot ruin their development and we cannot ruin the team's development. And this situation presents both, the possibility of both. And core values, culture and core values will answer all difficult questions. If we're a recreational team, all on board. If we're an elite team, that they have to see there's a culture and a core values that dictate what we're focused on. And if they don't match it, it's difficult, but we have to contend with it. And I had a slide. Oh, here it is. It's just not on the screen. So this is where I end my thing with 3 recommendations. Okay. Modified developmental pathways, recommendations, talented player to novice or developmental club. Often a new player walks in, has the anthropomorphic profile that you want for handball, but is in the hands of people that can't properly develop that player. I've seen this a lot. I've encouraged players to move from a club to another club or to focus elsewhere because they're not going to get the development. And it's sad. And there's players we've watched video. It's just sad. It's hard. It's one of the harder things for me when you have someone who has such potential and you have, and they're like not here near me and I can't help them. That's why I'm doing this type of symposium. That's why we put it together. The other one is talented player to elite club. Oh, this one is where so many talented players show up to an elite club and the elite club is just going and that player is so raw and they throw him in the wrong positions and they just say, kind of step in. That player needs to be developed parallel. It's so important that that player gets developed parallel to the team and given opportunities to come in as that player learns. Remember, we talked about it in tactics today. In attack, there's a process. If you have players at the advanced level and you try to plug in someone because they're an elite athlete into a situation where advanced skills are required, you will fail. They need to develop foundational skills. They need to develop progressive skills and then advanced skills. And then and only then will they succeed and will your means be out. And then you have novice player to elite club, and that's a recipe for disaster. And Julio and I are going to group share on the next one. So Julio is going to do a 7v6, a lecture, and I'll look at questions and answer them privately if anyone has them. But it's really important to understand, and I appreciate you listening to this, how the development process works as a team, depending on all those factors, and then how the modified developmental pathways are key to our success in the United States. It's the key. We have to develop parallel processes that focus on development of individuals that are behind the development of the team. And until we understand that, we're never going to succeed because we're going to lose players. I've seen so many talented players leave because of that. So thank you for listening. I'm going to hand it over to Julio now.
Okay, so give me a minute so I can share my screen.
No, I was just going to say, you're free to go. Just, we already had worked out that if you go a little bit over, it's okay. So.
Okay. So In paraphrasing or summarizing what Craig has said, we're going to talk a little bit about the advanced tactics of the game, and I think summarizing everything that Craig have said, I could actually add that when you come to a national team, you come to execute. You or to a developed team, you come more to execute rather than to actually learn, other than perhaps advanced tactics and things that are philosophically aligned with the coach, planning or plans for the team. So this breakout is technically a breakout presentation. Be short and sweet, but it will give you a little bit of understanding of the work of what we do with those players who are ready to take their development to the next step. And it's just like examples of how we use at the advanced tactics into game situations. I will specifically talk about the 7-player. Also commonly mistaken as a 7v6. The 7v6 tactics have always been around. What have changed is after 2016, the rule allowed any player other than the goalie to be the one who is in the court. Before, you needed to actually remember those days with the cutout jerseys, and the 7-player was coming in and he was the only one able to actually go back into the goal. Now it's a different story. Now you can actually have 7 field players and any of them can actually stop the goalie. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we use that 7-player, as part of the advanced tactics in the offense of the men's junior national team during the qualification tournaments that led to the World Championship. And obviously, just to give an idea of how handball, at the highest level can be played, and what are the things that we can achieve if we actually put everything together that you have learned up until now into game situation at a decent level. Okay, so just give me 1 minute and I will share my screen. Sorry about that. So let's look at this presentation. The use of the 7-player by the USA main national team, junior national team. And this is how we used it and how I planned it and what were the actual actions where we utilize it. Okay, so a brief overview. I mean, this is a 2 hours presentation that I have on the 7-player. I summarized it to 15 minutes, and that includes a couple of videos and a few diagrams, so you can see what I'm talking about. But why we use it and why should you use the 7-player? Okay, well, if you do it well, you always are going to have any numerical inferiority action in parity, which is basically what the coaches are doing it quite often now. Okay, simply because you want to play in superiority or to counteract a defensive system, which is basically the main reason why we used it. It was always used to counteract a defensive system, and very seldom we used it in inferiority, especially when we got to the highest level, to the World Championship and all that. It was too much of a liability to give goals with open goals, so we didn't use it past the IHF trophy continental phase. So quickly, how to use it? In my opinion, we quit positional plays to create confusion on defense, obviously to create numerical disadvantage in both sides of the court. If you play with 7, you're always going to have 4 versus 3 and 4 versus 3 on the other side. Okay. I will say that for now, if you don't have the time to prepare it well, you try to always prepare it where the four versus three is occurs on the opposite side of the court. So you have change a time for a successful change. If you just simply want to play 7-on-6, okay. If you have time to do it, you can improvise and perhaps use it in the side that is close to the bench as well. Now, tactically, how the men's junior national team used it. Okay, just give me 1 minute. We used it when the opponents were playing open defenses against us, and came as part of the analysis that I have of all our opponents. Christian mentioned before, learning about your opponents. I was able to scout Martinique almost like a year ahead of the tournament, because I was in Colombia as part of an assignment of the IHS, and I saw USA playing this team of Martinique. So I knew already, I was very familiar with the team, okay? And also, and I'm using Martinique as an example because mostly all the videos will come from this match. I also knew that Puerto Rico, I also knew that Mexico had open defenses. I know that Guadeloupe also had the 3-1. So I have in mind that I needed to come out with a system to overcome that tactical idea. Okay. Basically, we also use it when we wanted to create defensive anxiety, because that's one of the key factors as well as successful attack, is to make sure that your defenders are not prepared. Okay. And then when we wanted to overcome unfavorable scores, or when we were in numerical disadvantage. So we were playing in inferiority because of suspensions. We actually play with the open goal and achieve the parity by bringing the extra player. Okay, so here's an example of how we use it to deal with a 5+1 defense that Canada had against us. And if you listen to the commentators, it was very simple. He actually commented what we were doing. After the two videos, I'll show you a graphic of what was the concept behind this action. Okay, this is USA versus Canada. It is the gold medal match. As you can see, we're already up by almost 5. Well, 5, and this will be 6. Goal number 15. Just give me a minute. So this was the first action. As you can see, it starts with the person who's the player who's actually being defending on the 5+1, isolated from the actual attack. And what I do is that I actually switch the goalie with another player, and then we went from counteracting a numerical disadvantage, which is basically what actually not a numerical disadvantage, but taking away the best player of the game at the moment and creating a parity 5 versus 5. But by me actually using the 7-player rule, then I was actually able to create a numerical advantage by playing 6-on-5. Okay, this will be one. Now I'll play the other video and hear the commentators comments. They will basically explain what I'm saying right now. Okay. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Give me a minute. It's the other one video. So here's the actual diagram of what I did. Two things, and this is a trivia question, but perhaps someone can answer in the chat room, and Craig, you can look at it. There's a reason why. Well, there's a reason why I have Paul sitting right here. As you can see, the switch will be immediately. Okay, so we attack 6-on-5. The Canadian coach, what he wanted to do was to take Paul off the game, and so we can play 5-on-5 because he thought that Paul at that moment was the most dangerous player on the court. So he did that, and I counteracted that action by, switching the goalie and then bringing another player. So now we're playing 6-on-5, and if anything will happen, Rene will basically switch immediately with Paul, and he'll be in the goal. Another thing that I did is I moved the player as high as I could, almost next to the switching lane, to avoid if there was actually a goal, to avoid a fast throw off on an open goal, because this player needed to basically be behind the at least on the line right here. So that's the tactical idea. The tactical idea is that we create superiority by just adding a new player in this specific situation. Now we're gonna see how we solve the situation with an open, aggressive defense. I knew that Martinique, when they got in trouble, they will go with their go-to defense, which was a 3-3. They actually were really good at it because they come from the French system. So they since they're little kids, they're used to those type of game situations and they were very successful. So I knew that I needed to come out with something different to beat their skills. And part of it is just because we didn't have the time to prepare against a 3-3 defense. So I needed a quick solution. The quick solution was to use the 7 player in this fashion. Okay. So let's look at the video of Martinique, USA, same tournament. And once again, this is the team who was at the moment the reigning champion of the IHF Intercontinental IHF Trophy tournament. Mark Ortega and USA have beaten them in Colombia, but there was no Intercontinental phase that year. So they were the reigning program. And here you can see in the second half, we're doubling the score. And part of it was just done with all advanced tactics. So let's look at this, the application of the 7 player on a 3-3 defense, okay? Okay, so I'll show you another video, and then I'll explain to you with the diagram what I did. But the idea is that now they're playing 3-3 or more aggressive, and I brought in the 7 player to create that numerical disadvantage. But I want to show you the trick. What is it that I did and how I tricked the players from Martinique and also the coach. Okay. Another one. Is that? Okay, that was another example, and this is the best one. Oh no, sorry. Okay, so as you can see, that was a 6-0 partial. Okay, so this is right at the beginning of the second half. The coach from Martinique is desperate. He's, I'm gonna go out. I need a tactical change, and we were prepared for the tactical change. So here's how it worked. What I did was I I tricked the defense from Martinique. I let them believe that they were in control. So what I did is that I had a big disconnection between the first line of attack, the backcourts, and the line players. I had a huge disconnection. So what I did is that I actually created a big field of play right here in the middle. But the key to this was delaying the change. I waited for the right moment to ask, Rene to get out. Once Rene was out, then I sent one of the most, by far, the one that had the greatest tool set, which is Yon at the moment, and he was able to actually go in. As you can see, um, one of the actions that you saw, I used the two pivots. I have one here and one right here. He will actually come, and obviously will be in a good collaboration situation right here. And if this person is stay with this guy, he will go by himself. You saw it. The other variation that I had was that I used the two pivots, so he will come into the middle and he will always have an outlet. But the idea was that it got to a point where the Martinique coach didn't know what to do, and he was actually able to. He was forced to retreat to 6-0 again, and then we came back to our regular gameplay. So this was actually how I use these tactics to break an open defense. This is one of the handicaps of one of the problems that the seven player brought into the open defenses was that automatically, tactically you can break that defensive system with bringing the seven player. If you're playing out, then you need to come back because now you're gonna have four players or playing on the line. You're gonna have the two pivots and the two wingers. So it was one of the applications that we use. Obviously, the defenses have evolved to counteract these actions. There's a lot of flexibility now, a lot of understanding of these attacking options. So team have evolved, but I use this as a tool in my toolbox, like Christian said, as a back pocket play to counteract these actions. Now, another use for it is to actually play it in parity, and this is another example from the same game. And what's important about this clip is it's not the result. Is basically what the action after the result, and how this can be catastrophic if you don't play it well, because there's a lot of benefits to playing with a seven player, or in this case with 6 versus 6, because we are in inferiority. So that means that we were playing with an empty goal. But the importance of how advanced the mentality of the player have to be so this work. So now is another example of how we used it. Okay. We were 5-on-5. Okay. So one of So what went on here was that Nick scored the goal. We decided to actually that everything would normally happen on the opposite side of the court because we wanted, the change to be made by Nick, which is basically the fastest, wing in the team. But unfortunately, it just evolved with the 6-on-5 evolved to the left side, and Nick took the shot, and it was a fantastic goal. But what went on here was that we lost, concentration that in the on the fact that we were playing with an empty goal, and no one made the change. It was actually my 7-on-6 specialist, which is actually playing on the other side, who realized that we were on an empty net and decided to actually, run outside the court, because Nick went on to celebrate and Paul stayed watching the play. So look at this. So Nick was celebrating, Paul forgot about exiting, and this guy right here was the one who decided to actually go. So short presentation about the application of these advanced tactics. I wanted to show you this as a taste of what you can do when all the stars have aligned, when you have done everything that Craig and I have mentioned to you through the entire conference, and where you can get your team to play if you follow everything that Craig have mentioned before in the presentation that was leading to this breakout room. So if there's any questions or any comments for it, otherwise, Craig,
I think
I don't know
for
if you want to
time's
rest a
sake,
little bit.
I think for time's sake, we'll push forward. But
Okay.
thank you. Very important. It's in the modern game, the new 7v6 rule is something that, as much as I think they did a poll in Europe, and only like 20% of the coaches liked it, and half of them were from Portugal because it's the only way to equalize. But most like I said before, it's a situation we have to all prepare for now and develop at. So, and it's harder at the national team level. So thanks, Julio. I really appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen as we go into the next. Correct. Okay, everyone, we are at the final curriculum-based aspect of the symposium. I'm going to try to work through this not quickly, but efficiently, so that we can get to Christian Latulippe to tie it all in. This is the last presentation of categories of practice tasks, and this is geared towards group exercises for tactical development. These include small-sided games, tactical games, and basic game forms. All of these are blocks in the development pyramid and in the training pyramid. As you know, we have 3 left. As you can see, we're going to address this, and our goal is to complete the pyramid at the end. So you have a full sense of all of the developmental aspects of team handball. It's very important now, as we're focusing on the coach. So now we're focused on the gameplay coaching pyramid, which is at the top. And the goal is the finalization of building gameplay. And you can do all the technical drills you want. You can do all of the rudimentary drills you want. You can do all the joint technical drills you want. But until you build the context, the game problems, the tactical drills, the small-sided games into tactical games, into game forms, you can't perform at a level that is expected of your team. And as a coach, you're depriving them if you don't really focus on this final stage. And I appreciated Jared when he was on talking about, even in the development of conditioning and coordination, small-sided games were an essential task for him. I love small-sided games. Some of my videos might be of kids, because most of my stuff is from developing children, because I come from the PE perspective. But in this sense, they're very important and very essential for the proper development of a team in the sport of team handball. The practice tasks, small-sided games, tactical games, game forms, I just identified them. Now we break off the tactical training pyramid, and now we complete it. Why do we complete it? We complete it for synergy. Remember, you have to have the joint technical skills and you have to have the small group collaboration. And the way you get the small group collaboration is the small sided games. And the small sided games come out. You can't do the small sided games until you start to work on the joint technical drills. And so the process works. You develop the technical pyramid first, and then the tactical pyramid second. And that's when synergy happens and the gameplay pyramid is complete. And now you have the whole complete development. Small sided games. Develop techno-tactical skills without structural gameplay elements. This is important. It shouldn't be in the context of a court or of orientation to a court. It should be really well-defined objects of the game, similar to the microphases of the sport. These are like tag games, keep away games, partner passing, but they're endless. I have an archive of hundreds of small-sided games. And so they're general, technical, and tactical demand. So the focus is not on technique. The demand is on increased decision-making and problem solving. The demand is not there, but the high technical demand is there. Or it's general, I'm misreading my thing. General, technical, and tactical. Now high tactical, high cognitive involvement, technical actions in non-specific tactical context. This is what's non-specific tactical context, meaning from the game. Keep away is working on one thing, spacing, collaboration, passing, but it's best in early and intermediate stages of technical skill development, but is used throughout. The methodology for them is develop attack and defense skills at the same time. Clearly define the object of the game and frame it in skills or tactics you are focusing on with respect to game phase and to game problems. Now you take away, you can frame it, something we talked about before. Framing is a useful tool. And so you frame the problem you are presenting. You are trying to make space and collaborate. And then you translate that to the actual game context by telling it to them. And you can use specific situations. Do you remember when they pressed us? The 10 passes game is great for learning how to catch and move and pass and move, but you can use it in the context of a game and say, you remember when they pressed us the last 3 minutes? Well, this is the skill you need to do better at that situation. And even though the context isn't there, they understand how to apply it later. You utilize court space as suited, but try to confine the game space to that of the tactical context in the game. Playing a keep away game 3v3 and a half court is not an important. If it's a warm-up game, maybe, but it really doesn't. You really want to work in a space that's going to replicate the size space that they're going to have. And remember when we start out in the development process, we use larger spaces and we get proficiency, and then we use a smaller space and get proficiency until we're down to the gap phase or space. And so we work our way from 4v3 plus goalkeeper, which has lots of space to attack, lots of vulnerable areas, to a 6v6 court players where there's limited space. And so the small-sided games need to be confined to similar space. And you start with exaggerated constraints and tighten constraints to game-like conditions. Use in all phases of individual and team development and incorporate in all aspects of practice. Warm up, cool down, learning objectives. You can fit small-sided games everywhere. And remember this, it is better to have more small-sided games playing at once than to have one to evaluate the quality of gameplay and decision-making. Think about this. Do you want 10 kids waiting on the sidelines watching other people watch you coach them? Or do you want 2 small-sided games of 5v5? And the goal has to be developing players with the idea that the most is better in this case. Just keep them playing. You can structure it so you can walk in between like the pharaoh and have observation of both. It's very important, but this is an essential part of it. We're going to show here small-sided games of kids that we shot in Montpellier through running all the stuff for the IHF Education Center. And these can be adult games. They're playing a passing game. Look, they're learning the first stages. The small-sided games, it's not in the direction of the court, it's on the court, but they're just playing in a game where it's keep away. And then they can shoot after they get a certain number of passes. So that's an exaggerated context. But small-sided games, this could be a warm-up game. Now you're developing technical skills in a warm-up, and tactical skills, and you're only using warm-up time. You're not even in the structured elements. The next practice task we're going to talk about is tactical games. Tactical games are important. This becomes the pre-competition, what I just talked about, phase, and the last phase of preseason becomes very important here with using tactical games. And I'm going to ask Julio a question. Are you muted or mic'd, or are you good?
I'm good.
Yeah, so I want to ask you a question, because we're going to kind of interact here conversationally, because you utilize almost from the beginning. When we arrived in Portugal, it was literally like the first thing we did was like set up the inside defenders and have after warm up and that, and begin seeing the 3v2 or the 2v2 and the 3v2. And I'm curious, in time constraints, what's your philosophy to start at first? Looking for the offensive players or looking at the defensive players when you do that, or both when you're running tactical games?
Well, I normally when I set my 6-0, the tactical idea of the 6-0, I always have in mind what's going to be the defense's progression to from the 6-0. So I like to play 6-0, 5-1, and that's it, and if remember, we call it the mousetrap, the whatever, la ratonera, which is basically like that shallow 5-1 where it can actually progress back to a 6-0. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why I prefer the flexibility of my number 3s and now my number 2s. That's one of the main ideas. All the idea and why I put all the emphasis on that interaction in the middle is because, based on the analysis and based on the progress of the team, I realized that we didn't have good control of the pivots. So I wanted to put the task of controlling the pivots on the number 2s rather than on the number 3, so they could actually remain flexible, unless that the pivot was placed in the middle of the number 2. So this is why, from the get-go, I wanted to work on that collaboration, that synergy between the central defenders, based on the task that I had actually created for the team. And part of it is because, we were transforming from 6-0 to 5-1. They could actually close the gap and become then a 5-0, for lack of better terms, zonal defense in the back. That was basically the main idea. It's also a philosophical approach to defense. Some coaches prefer that the number 3s are not flexible, that the ones who are flexible are the number 2s. Some people want the number 2s and the number 1s. I personally, because of what I had at task, I wanted them to be flexible. Now, with the reality of the men's national team is different. You have really strong central defenders, so the inside defenders can be a little bit more flexible. So
this is an important part, as I carry on, to say, I talked about this before. You have preference and temperament of the coach, and you have what I called the commander's intent. It's the directional down. But how do you train and develop that? And so this is what I'm going to focus on next, because tactical games are what takes this concept and develops it and prepares it for gameplay. And so small-sided games were totally void of game context. Tactical games are only game context. And I'm going to explain to you how. The practice task, it's a develop techno-tactical skills and problem solving in particular game context under game-like conditions. And it doesn't mean you start with game-like conditions, but you end there, passing to the pivot in 3v2 attack against inside and half defender. Just an example. But you have to have the context of the court. We saw in some of the drills that other coaches have used where they use apparatus to define a space. I use cones or poly spots to define a space. We're focused on how do we attack this space on the court, and you can't take away the fact that it's particular for this area and particular for our team. They are integrated tactical movements in specific decision-making contexts. And so this is also important. So on defensive training in a tactical game, you would have central defenders, middle defenders, inside defenders you're seeing how they communicate. You're seeing how they work together. I always place, it's the first thing I place as a coach. I try to find the good collaboration between inside defenders, which means they can manage depth and width, meaning the width because they have to cover, they have the pivots coming behind, they have to control space, and depth because they have to come out to neutralize in the air or to neutralize on the ground. And they had to be very physical, and they have to have a chemistry together. Like I showed you in my graph of my team before, the inside defenders, it's essential because they control they manage the area of greatest value. There's specific tactical and technical actions. You know, you can break it down. I break it down all the time. I showed you that woman who did the attacked and she did the split step to the German player, who the backcourt player did the split step to the out with the windmill, with the bounce, with the off-footed jump shot. You know, and you prepare her for that with sound tactical games. She's seen that situation before. She saw some variance in the defender and the defensive alignment, and it's only because of tactical games and the memorization and the historization in her head of that's what worked for me before. And I'm going to labor this point because tactical games are hugely important, and I'll show you the video in a second. And so they're scenarios and decision-making in context. They're high cognitive demand, high decision-making demand, position and opponent specific. They are essential for pre-competition, and they're essential for late preseason for club teams. You're almost better to not do the standard game form and run, and because there's too many elements, because the more time you have in tactical games, the better your teams will be. I'll say that again. The more time you spend during the late preseason and the pre-competition phase on tactical games, the better your teams would be. There is no reason to spend 20 minutes of a practice with international players working on the simple fast break. It should be there's no reason. It's a pre-game warm-up. But if you focus your time in pre-competition or late preseason on running the fast break, which ends up being the most natural and personal thing there is in the sport, it's not, and it's limited. You might get 6 a game and you still have 52 other actions you have to win in tactical games. Focus on the tactical games in those times. And it needs to be high demand. I'm talking, it needs to be the highest cognitive demand. Start slow, present options, but it has to be the highest cognitive demand, and it has to be the most physical. It must replicate the actual game performance that's going to be demanded of them in a short time. For us in Portugal, how do we take guys that had the summer off and they graduated from college, had 2 months off, arrived in Portugal and weren't in shape, or weren't in what I would call peak performance? We did it through rough tactical games. And it's important. And so remember the OODA loop, the see, know, select, do, orient, observe, decide, or observation, orientation, decision, and action. That's hugely important. And this is best in intermediate and late stages of technical skill development. You should not introduce players to tactical games because they don't even know the tactics yet. You have to develop to it. It's a process. They have to have gone through searching for space, creating space, defeating mixed zone, defeating zone, to understand the tactics that are being expected of them. And if you try to plug a new player in, and I'll go back to my modified developmental pathway, try to solve the 3v2 with interior defenders, a pivot, and 2 backcourt players, the player has no context. The player has no understanding of what they're doing. They haven't even learned the foundational and progressive skills that are needed to solve that problem. And so each gameplay level, remember at foundational, there's a gameplay for it. There's a synergy. Progressive, there's a synergy. And then advanced, there's a synergy. But they need to have level appropriate skills, and tactical games are the testing ground and the developing ground for those skills. The methodology: clearly frame the game context and build tactical games that are relevant to the level of the present development. Work from slow to game-like conditions. Work from passive to active defense. Present problems with multiple solutions, and allow small groups to resolve on their own before instructing. This might be my most important thing that I say. You present them with the tactical situation. We'll go back, 3v2 inside defenders with a pivot. And then you watch and you let them manipulate it. Remember, athletes are kinesthetic learners. They need to manipulate it. They need to feel it. They need to plug it into place and see what fits. They need to test limits. And if you keep instructing and saying they're doing wrong, it's incorrect coaching. You should always say, what were your other options? Because then you're helping them with problem solving and decision making. And they could say, oh, I had the pivot. I took the shot, but I had the pivot. I had a bounce pass to the pivot. I recognized it, but didn't do it. Never stop them from playing to correct unless what they're doing is dangerous, or if they continue with the action, it is going to ruin their development. But other than that, let them form and see it. You freeze in slow moments to clearly illustrate, and then you practice problems that they will most often face in games and work backwards from there. You should watch a game of handball. You should count the situations that how many times does the left back attack outside and half defenders? It's not a lot. How many times does left back attack half and inside defenders? It's a ton. And so you should focus on that situation more than you should focus on the rarer situation, and work backwards from there. And then from there, you need to include specialty situations that are important and last minute dynamics. You should prepare all last minute dynamics. I'm going to play a video here of tactical games, and so you can watch the development process. So you're starting to see. So now here they're starting this was some just tactical drills to warm up. They're just warming up with tactical drills, kind of getting a sense. Here, let me turn off the music. There's the tactical drill, but it's the setup for what comes next. It's the setup for what comes next. Now they're starting to have some 1v1 free play. So now it's a tactical situation. Look at the markers on the court. Well-defined gaps. If you go outside the gap, that's those foam. That guy just got knocked in the teeth. I would always tell my players. That defender just redirected him out of the zone. There's a second defender there. That shot wouldn't exist. This is why tactical games become important. So here you have left back and right back against half defender, and they're both playing at their best. Here now you have, so the situation I just said, 3v2 against inside defenders, well-defined space. The foam marks it. Pivot presenting himself well. Backcourt trying to solve, defense trying to solve. This is why tactical games are so important, because they establish clear game context and they allow the players to work freely. This is where you develop preference. This is where you develop the skills you need. The kid walking through the drill is my favorite. Every team's got that guy that just walks back through the drill while it's going on. But see, look, see, good defense, went neutralized in the air, coming back to it again. More situations, defense is solving it. 3v2 against inside defenders, space is clearly defined. Coach is letting them play. He's not stopping play. He's letting them have experience at it. Now it's 3v3 against with no pivot. And then you add the pivot. So now you have 3v3 in the central zones. Learning to play collaboratively, learning to cross intuitively. These are all important skills to learn. Okay, now I'm going to tell you something that's important. If every time you coached, you stopped the team to tell them they're doing it incorrect during tactical games, you ruin the most important lesson from tactical games, which is the developing the experience. Remember, I had said that in my defining factors of team development in the last lecture. For players, experience is everything, and it's not just game experience. It's also practice experience. You build the practice experience to create gameplay. You play the game to create a greater experience that you then work all the way back to practice and resolve in practice. These are key parts of development. Here we're going to look at well-defined ones. Now we have older kids without the court limitation. So this gives them a little bit of extra space. They're playing in a large zone. See, he just cheated the game. The game isn't to go around the cone because that's a defender. The game is to come at it. 2v2, hard one to solve. If the defense is coordinated, see here, and my friend Benny is clearly identifying is clearly identifying the situation. And that's the framing. Remember, we must frame it, and that's the framing, and he's doing it correctly. See, there they have a supporting player. You can add supporting players. See, now 3v3. It's a development process. Look, now he's going in at second pivot. Now we've incorporated the wing. And we're simultaneously developing players in attack and defense. Got a supporting player. 3v3 plus 1. 2-on-2. Or we're back to the beginning. Okay, so that's what's important to understand. The tactical game has to be within the tactical. And I think Julio can agree, this is a majority of what we practiced in Portugal and Spain, correct?
Yep, that was.
Yeah.
And then put them then together, you know, like
and only a few minutes of full court, because it's irrelevant to see how they do in the full court when it's small group collaborations and that they need to get a sense and apply it. But you can't spend 35 minutes when you're at international tournament, you have 60 minutes of practice, and you can't spend 35 minutes of it playing full court. You have to focus and use your time correctly. And tactical games in pre-competition and competition and in season are the most important, because you look at the game video and you say, oh man, we got to solve this problem. And that's how you do it. This is how you solve the problems you see of the players. And so then we come to the last practice task. We've made it. Well, there's 3 parts of it, but we made it. We made it to the end. Okay, so now here we build content, and now we have gameplay. And now get the partial game forms, basic game forms, and standard game form is like taking everything you know and then seeing how it goes. And I'm going to explain first partial, move to basic, and just touch it standard because it's obvious. Partial game forms are to develop techno-tactical skills with modified gameplay elements. Partial game forms are really great in the development process. They're not very good during pre-competition or that. So they're good at the development process, and I'll explain why. It could be 2v2 with supporters, 3v3 with supporter on half, meaning there's people engaged that are giving you an extra option. So it's a stage in the development process that allows you to recognize, I can't win this attack. I'm resetting, I'm passing to the supporter sends it back to me, and now I can go at it again and reset what I just learned about myself, 4 seconds ago. I can now apply again and try this thing. And that's that manipulation, trial and error phases. Those are on the players. Partial game forms are awesome for the middle stages of development and for mastery, especially for mastery. And one of the things that I love about partial game forms is the joint supporter. You can have a 1v1 with supporter on half and a 2v2 on the other half, and the one ball and the supporter is one ball for each side, but the supporter's the ligament between the two, and it helps players develop the sense that there's 2 individual games being engaged on the periphery of the handball court. 3, only in inferior or in superiority situations does it become so painfully obvious, but it's 6v6 versus 6v6, a flat defense, it's harder to see it, but you're creating 3v2 maybe on one side and 2v2 or 2v1 on the other side. And the partial game forms allow you to have this player that's not is only a tactical player and not a engaged player. And that player goes and supports. You can do it with one ball, and that player then chooses. That's great for center back development, for recognition, which is the center back will choose. So the backcourt will be operating, and you'll be forced with a wing and you'll have a wing and a backcourt and a wing, backcourt, and pivot. And then you have a center back who's controlling the space and making decisions on that space, on the evaluating the moment, and then saying, oh, you know what? It's favorable over here. Let's go here. And that person is the decision maker in that, because that's the role the center back has to play. Center back has to recognize, and the center back should be the greatest of observers and orientators on the court. They have to recognize what the defense is doing. They have to recognize the weakness and then generate a play at speed. They have to do tactical action at speed to make it work. And so they're integrated tactical movements in modified decision-making concept or context. They're specific tactical and technical actions. They're highly technical context. They're series of combined technical actions, and they reduced complexity. That's a reduced complexity because you're focused on 2 games simultaneously, or you've reduced it to such a way that you have 2v2 with supporters on both sides. Seems like 4v2, but it's not. Each of the backcourt players are learning when to regroup and let the next small group next to them, because partial game forms do that. They teach you how to figure out how your small group is doing and connect with the other small groups. It visually, because you structure the court in such a way to separate it or to, cut off a part and make it inactive aspect, it does it. Best in all stages of technical skill development. There's no partial game forms are like they're the base level of gameplay, but they're the greatest form of gameplay teaching because they force we have individual and team, and it connects to that small group, and it forces you to see the small group. My methodology is simple. After the dynamics of gameplay to alter the gameplays or the dynamics of gameplay to illustrate small group game problems and solutions. Again, frame it. Use supporting players and collaborators to extend and expand. Utilize passive and active defense in context building. Now this is something I'm not going to get into here, because when we get into how to coach and how to use, passive and active defense is an important stage in understanding. You present with inactive. So you introduce an inactive, you develop with passive, with some active, but in the pre-comp and the next phase of, or the pre-comp and the last phase of training camp, you must start developing active defense within it. Because I can perform split steps pretty good for a guy that's 48 years old, but I can't do it in games anymore. It's done. It's gone. It doesn't matter if I can do it alone. It only matters, can I do it against someone who wants to neutralize me? Okay. Work from slow to game-like conditions. Divide the court in halves to frame and simultaneously and frame the simultaneous small group dilemmas, and develop and reinforce gameplay problems by permitting some supporting players to support both games. And then we come to basic game form. Basic game form is what we talked about. I don't even need to really go into it. I'm going to breeze over it. The 4v3 plus a goalkeeper in the previous lecture, second lecture of the day. 4v3 plus goalkeeper is a basic game form. You let them play that out until they understand how to select space. Then you move to the 4v4 against full court. And then you move to the 5v5 against mixed, and then flat. And so it's this process, and those game forms matter, and you should know when to apply them and when not to. I'm just going to go. I've already explained this.
If I could add that,
Yeah, add.
it's basically the evolution of the sport. Like the game as we knew it in the past, with the game being so fast paced and so frontal and vertical. The importance of what you're talking about, like the small group collaborations and all part of the games, because we no longer see those long attacks, where the attacks are being built at what the IHF call it a couple of times during Spain. Walking handball doesn't exist anymore. The idea is that go into the small game situations, so the game remains fast paced. So what you're presenting is basically what this game is evolving to.
And it's important to know the 4v3 plus goalkeeper is the greatest tool for transition play, because you don't have a goalkeeper. If it's a turnover, it forces retreat. It forces kids to get back. It forces players to get back, and it's dynamic in how it creates the and that driving force to solve the objects of the game of retreat, because you don't have anyone in goal, and if you don't get back, they have an easy goal if you screw it up. And so, in a way, the basic game form, the initial one, creates this fast-paced gameplay, and we need to reflect that in our practice on how we develop teams and players. I'm not going to go over this. We've talked about this. I'm trying to get through so Christian can come in here, but this is important when we come into the last phase of it. So the methodology, the game problem should be developed in the proper order. So I said this about the modified developmental pathways. There's an order to development. If your team has gone up and a new player comes in and you expect them to play at this level, it's going to be a long, brutal, agonizing experience before they quit. If your team plays at this level and a new player comes in, hopefully that player will help pull them up. I can give you an example of that. But often what happens is that player leaves because it's not engaging to them. And then it's just the way it works. Once the basic game problem, this is the most important thing. Once the basic game problem for a basic game form is resolved, you must move to the next one. Once a group solves the open space dilemma, you must move. There's nothing else for them to do. They would just stagnate. And so once they've solved it, it forces the defense to react and to create a different defensive structure to beat it. And then you return to basic game forms to highlight key aspects of the tactical development progression and to address issues and problems in resolution of later problems. This is important because they're great teaching tools. Going back to the full court 4v3 plus goalkeepers with my high schoolers is something I do like many times a month. They enjoy it. It focuses them back on, okay, we've been working on all these tactical elements. In the end, it's just about space. I want that space. I want that goal. And so it really forces them to do that. And all players need to address the game problems presented in each game form and cannot be fully developed if they do not. If development of full actual players is our goal, they have to go through each of those stages. The seeking space stage, an 18-year-old who's a Division I athlete returns and plays and starts playing, and they're going to pick up the game space really quick. They're going to pick, you're not talking a year at this. They're going to pick it up quick, and you have to be representative to recognize and evaluate and say, hey, they picked it up. So here we're going to look at a basic game form. And it's best with kids. Goalie comes forward. Look, so these kids are funny because there's some of the kids are Montpellier kids who I think I left the video. This little girl, I love her. And some of the videos that we have, she is just, you can tell she's been developed in a good program from a young age. I mean, she's still young, but she's so fierce, the young one. But look, I like this video because it clearly shows from the angle how the goalkeeper comes forward. She just wants to win it. You can tell she's in a different phase. She's advanced past this game form. She understands the object of the game is to create space and score. You know, and so it's very important to see the game form and understand it as a practice task and a tool in coaching. And now you have standard game form. And now I'm not going to talk about this. We're at the end. The standard game form, like I said, is an evaluative tool, a training tool in the sense of pulling together all the parts. I think too many clubs in the United States have a really disorganized first 25 minutes of practice and then do 35 minutes of pretty much unfettered gameplay. And there's nothing to build on, there's nothing to develop. And there's other clubs, some of the elite clubs, who have a really well-structured plan and implement it correctly, and you're never going to catch up to them. You're never going to make the transition from developing club to elite club if the structure of your practice and the development philosophy you take on in methodology doesn't interact with some of the material you've been presented here this weekend. And it's a lot of material. This is an overview. I could do a whole lecture on basic game forms. I was going to, in the game-based problems. I was going to introduce the 4 major game problems. What are they? Move the ball, forward progression, maintain ball possession, attack the goal and score, and regain ball possession. The game problems, that's at its most basic. And so I could spend a weekend talking to you about that. But what we wanted to talk about this weekend was developing the pyramid in such a way that you could understand and walk away saying, you know what, my team, we do really good at technical drills and standard game form, but we're missing all of these different areas. And it's okay to say, I don't understand that. It's okay to, at this point, to say, I don't understand that, which is why the things to consider. Small-sided games are key to developing small group problem solving. Remember the game problems of each phase from our first lecture today, and I just mentioned. Tactical games develop and refine gameplay in specific game context and are important tools for improving gameplay. And partial and basic game forms spotlight the main game problems and can be used to introduce, develop, and fix gameplay. And that's it. We've arrived, the pinnacle of development, gameplay. You now should have a basic understanding of what it takes to build. Remember we said coherent, and then moves into competent, moves into masterful. But there's different words we can use in different places, but you want to progress from coherent to competent, from competent to masterful. But there's levels in between that. And that was just a generalization to effectively show you how that is. But this is the small group exercises you need to develop tactical concepts. When we finally get a real education experience in the United States, we will provide real tangible information and break down the sections of it for you. But for right now, it's important to understand where you need to get to if you're going to get there. And I appreciate you for the lecture. Is there any questions?
Let me see. I think there's one. Rod just mentioned possession, but it's not also true that chances of. Can you read it? It's a long question.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. Okay, the question is it not also true that chances and opportunities for possession can already first be created by positioning? To which degree is not also true that low possession teams can win games by making possessions and speed count? Well, I don't know what you mean by low possession teams. Handball's a dynamic sport. The attacks are equal. One team won't have more attacks than it might have one. Sometimes it's one. Likely it's one more or one less. But because of the game phase construction of it, some teams have one more possession. So I don't know what low possession. There are teams that don't make it too organized attack often, and have less organized attack. Are you?
Because this game is about possession. It's about regaining if you lose it or keeping it.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be that transitional game if you lose the possession. The truth is that there are teams that train, give an example, Norway, that they are fantastic in regaining possession and using the transitional phase of counterattack to score. So perhaps in the actual match result at the end of the day, you'll realize that out of the 45 goals that they scored on you, only 7 came from positional play, but the rest came from what they wanted, which is basically the counterattack. So I don't know if I'm stepping on your toes right now.
No. I think he amended it. My team can have 40% possession, the other team 60%. Oh, of the time. Okay, I get that was a little bit of the time. I don't think. I'll be honest with you. Time of possession matters as a strategy,
Right.
but the possessions, the effectiveness of possessions, how many attacks? So attacks are made up of actions. An action can end in a say I take a shot and it's deflected and it goes out of bounds. That attack is made up of sub actions, and we chart the actions a team has with resolution. There's a result from it, and sometimes the result is neutral and it's just a restart. I attacked and I was neutralized, and it was a negative defensive foul, and we had a free throw. And so I don't think time of possession matters more than the effectiveness of the attack. I go into a game, I think more strategically than that. I know a team's percentage, and I'll give you, this is a deep dive into my coaching philosophy. I know a team's success rate percentage. If I know a team has a 55% success rate, I have to slow the game down to a standstill, because I can only stay within striking reach of that team if I limit the number of possessions from attacks from 55, say, per team in a game down to 45.
That's what we did with Japan. That's what we did with Japan. We,
Yeah,
we
so-
that if
so
we
that's
played
how-
like that, we were gonna lose.
yeah, Mexico, like I used this example before. I beat Mexico 23-21, and the day before they had scored 36 on Brazil, and I knew they had this wild, crazy, light your pants on fire, fly down the field, dynamic gameplay. And I slowed that gameplay down to a standstill. I broke every small group collaboration between the two strongest players on the court. Jonah, who was the star for Julio on the juniors, well, this was the youth team, and I had Jonah spend the whole game breaking up every small group collaboration between the best two offensive players on the court. Whether if it was the left back in the pivot, he was basically fronting the left back. If it was the left back and the center back, all he did was not let them connect. And then we just slogged the game to a standstill because the percentages said it didn't matter the time of possession, it mattered effectiveness. I knew my team was going to be about 50%, and I knew they were going to be about 55%, which meant I couldn't let them have a huge number of shots on goal. I had to limit that number of shots because math-wise said that was the only way I was going to stand a chance. And then we had things go our way. Some 50-50 because that's what you want to do as a coach. You want to create a gameplay in which you have the potential to win. What did I say? Last 10 minutes of a game matter most. We were tied like 18 or 19-19 going into the last 5 minutes, and we had two 50-50 balls went our way, and we had two saves, and that was the difference. I kept us within the structure. My commander's intent was to slow the game to a standstill. And so I think you need to look not at possession time, but effectiveness of the possessions to answer that question. So,
All right, fantastic. Let's jump into Christian because we are.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. We could deep dive that one because I have lots of, I'd like to deep dive that on another time. So thank you for the question, Paul.
Sorry, Christian, we went over time.
You guys can talk.
You have 2 minutes, Christian. That's all you've got. Just kidding. No, we've been
all right.
We're behind schedule almost all day, so we're keeping with the theme. Thanks, Christian.
The presentation is really short, so you can
just stop your sharing, Craig. Hi, everyone. Again, I will, my last task was try to present you a planning for success and give you some example, what I consider important for coaches to plan when they're beginning a new season. So here's my key factor for you to consider. The evaluation of your team, your players you've got. We'll come back after that. Establishing realistic but challenging objective. Design a training plan, design the right game plan, and design, just give you an example after that of a microcycle or optimize your practice plan. So it won't be that long, just stand with me on this one. So in order to prepare a good training plan, you need to know your team, your players. In order to design the right game plan, also you need to have a good idea of who you've got on your team. So anthropometric will play a factor. If you have a small team, a tall team, you can vary maybe the defense, the speed of the games you will play. So there is some strategies related to that. How many lefties, how many goalkeepers? It will be easier to have more continuity in your game if you have lefties on the right side. If you have enough goalkeepers also for practicing, all these things are important. Your level of athleticism, are you a very strong team or a small and speedy one, or you're tall but very fast? All these things matter in order of what type of game plans you will put in place, and that could also affect your training plan. If you have a very fit team and you can already jump into technical or tactical development, then that's good. The level of your technical skills, you have experienced players, people with tactical knowledge, all that has to be taken into account. or if you have one or two experienced key players and a lot of new players that you have to teach the game, then it will all affect how you will build your training plan and your game plan. So some things for you to put in your mind when it's the beginning of the season and you try to design a perfect training plan for your year. But planning remain important and a huge skills to develop for a coach. Establish realistic but challenging objective. This is maybe what I like the most about my job is every new season has a new goal, has new objective, whether it's to win a match, whether it's to win a championship, whether it's to qualify for an event, whether it's to just do better than last year. What I like is that the objective must be challenging and motivate your player to work harder. So I don't know, if I'm a new team out there and new club who develop, my goal is to try to win a couple of games in the NECHC, for example. Or if I'm the New York team and I win it all every year, then maybe my next goal is to try to win one game at the Super Globe event, or to win the North American Club Championship. So I think every time you have a new season, it's an opportunity for you as a coach to set a new challenge for your group and for your athletes. So, and that's what's motivate the players to come back and train, and that's what motivate your group to push, let's say, a little bit harder the next year. I think throughout the year also you should provide some individual goal to your athletes. A player must master a new type of shots. They need to be better at a lob or a spin shot. A team must control the number of turnovers, throughout the season. You give them an objective through that. So I think it helps, to focus on things to improve. When you talk about small game earlier, Craig and Julio, I think every time you put an objective, something to play for, threat of doing suicide run or something like that, you will see your team improve and push a little bit harder. I think those are the fun part. This is why they play a team sports, is to have some challenge and play games and try to beat someone and try to beat the other team. So I think all those objectives are important in order to establish some goals. So I think you're training, for me, there are some guidelines out there. Because of COVID era, this become even a huge discussion, in my clubs, in my federation, through discussion with coaches. And I think for the safety of your athletes, a new season should start at least with a 6 weeks general preparation, in which you will physically prepare your players. Be careful, that they have enough strength, and that they build their conditioning so they don't get severe injuries as they go through their season. And now with COVID, because we're stopped, we're going to restart our season, but we have to implement another preparation period. So we must adapt now to the new situation. I think it's a perfect time also in the general preparation to review the key technical skills, the small group collaboration, to review or implement your new game plan, so your tactics that you will use throughout the season, and to work on your team cohesion. So every time you can do that, it's always a benefit your team in the future. During the competition period, this is when you will generally try to maintain your physical skills. So at least throughout the weeks, you will maintain some aerobic sessions, where your teams will run and maintain some sort of a physical and conditioning and technical skills. This is also the time where you improve your tactical synergy, and this is when you master and regulate your game plan. So use your games that you have to improve your game plan, so you can focus on achieving your objective. If it's winning the national championship or finishing better at the national championship, then you will use your season in the USA to improve that, so you can perform well when you arrive in May. You must be ready to adapt your training plan to your schedule or to crazy event like COVID, for example. And you must plan a transition period, after a full season, or your players, don't go from, a lot of trainings to nothing. So I think before the final break, behind the final vacation, it's important that they are enjoying sometimes with less pressure and playing the game a little bit. So this is an example on an advanced training plan that I used a couple of years ago that discuss, my practice schedule, my general preparation period, how I will train my energetic system, my strength training, my technical and tactical training, what I will be focusing on, and with my competition schedule. And I put volume and intensity to it. We don't need to go into that type of details, but just give you an advanced example of that. If you are in a season in your club team, I think it's more important to break it down to, a preparation period, competition period, and a very important competition period that is your main objective, and a transition period. I think we saw Jared talking about too. This is true for conditioning and strength training, and it's also true for handball training. So with my training plan, I think it's important to design the right game plan. We discussed that before, but your game plan should your team and define how you will win, how you will run your fast, how you will attack, how you will cheat, how you will play with a man advantage or man disadvantage. And your game plan should be regularly evaluated, and regulation should be provided throughout the season, so it gets better and better, and the timing between your athletes get, stronger. And my last point, the training plan is a macro cycle. The monthly plan or the preparation period, competition period can be considered as a mesocycle. Then you arrive with a micro cycle, which is, your week, what you will do in your week. And I think, it should comes down also to a practice plan. What you should have in your practice plan. I think the number of players you have at practice, how many lefties, how many goalies, what is your main objective or secondary objective, what is the list of your learning situation. And for each learning situation, I will give you an example, but I'll give you an example later. We can come back to it. So, for example, a quick practice plan, how many players I have. So in this one, I have 7, have 1 injured players. I decided to create a main objective was to work on pick and rolls. And then I made a list of 5 learning situation that you could do in XPS now, or you can write it down. Here's an example of what I wrote down for a practice plan. Learning situation number 4. Now I want to work on the 3 versus 3 pick and roll games. Objective of situation was 1, 2, and 3. So it helps you to prepare what you want to work on. And I think what's the most important things that I learned throughout my career is every time you do an objective, it must have a purpose. You need to know, if you don't write it down, but you need to know exactly what you will do. What is the operating rules and goals, and try to put a challenge on the drills, so there is an objective, a clear objective there. And then I need to know as a coach what's my expected behavior, what I'm looking for the athletes to do. And in a certain situation, they need to handle some perceptual problems. They need to understand not getting too close from defender. There is all sort of expected behavior for you that you expect, and after that you will assess how they do. And then this is the observed behavior. Then this is a report you have to think, okay, I expected that, and here's what I observed. And then you need to make a quick diagnosis of that. Is it a problem of perception? Is it a problem that they don't know what to do? Is it a problem that they lack energy because of what they did before? Is it a biomechanical problems because they don't know how to make a jump shot or make a set shot? Is it a relational problems? They don't know how to understand the work with the pivot or how to connect with somebody else? Is it an emotional problem because when they fail, then they they lose their mind and they don't know how to solve it. And I think this diagnosis is important for you to provide the right regulation. So, and you need to anticipate those regulation. So you need to review the footwork. Do you need to review how to do a pick? Do you need to review how to keep their arms up, and all that stuff? And I think for me, understanding how to make a valuable, an important learning session is one of the most important job as a coach, and helping them to get better and make your athletes better. And throughout these exercises, you can also plan to make some evolution of your exercise, so it's not too boring and you don't repeat the same situation for 20 minutes. So that was an example for me. I think planning for success is different between being a professional and non-professional coach. I can understand when you work full-time or when you study at home, you don't maybe have that much time to prepare your practice the way you should be, but it's still important for you to be a leader. And for me to be a leader is to provide the right orientation and the right guidance to your athlete, because at the end, a huge part of their successes is in your dedication in being a better coach and be prepared. So to finish that, always seek to improve your knowledge. Those who assist to this symposium, I think that was your intention. And I wanted to take a second to thanks Craig and Julio for all the efforts they put into this great symposium. I assist to 95% of it. And I think it's great tools, and I hope we can reproduce that in the future. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Christian. I have one question for you before we go to the next section, the final. When you are, the reason I chose or thought of you to about this is because you are so structured. And I think as a coach and as a player, I would appreciate it as a player, but as a coach, I very much appreciate it. The difficulty, I guess, what would be the level of commitment to planning should we were talking about that person who's got a job and a family and is trying to assist 1 or 2 days a week with the club, how much should they invest in the planning process and of the archival process that you kind of talked about, and how much should they focus on the content of what they're doing? Meaning, we've been talking about this balance between knowing and doing, and practice planning is an important developmental tool. But in this situation, they also need to learn, like that I showed you, that the ideal staff and then the reality, and that they're underserved in a lot of areas. And so how much or how can they use practice planning and planning itself to improve that aspect as well?
I don't know. I've been coaching all my life, but I remember when I was younger, I was interested in what I will do. When you hear Colleen earlier, she got interested in searching for exercise, use some database that are available on the internet. I think you need to be interested. As you have more experience, then things get a little bit easier after that to plan. So I think overall, at the beginning of the year, you need to sit down and spend several hours on thinking what will be your game plan, what will be your training plan, or your training plan throughout the years. And then this thing evolve all the time, because you could have injuries, you could have issues with players leaving, coming back, and so on. But this is, as a coach, you always think 24/7 almost to, okay, what I need to do next, what is my intention. But I would say for clubs out there, I think just be interested. Being a coach is spending times at the beginning to prepare your training plan, a good game plan. And then for practice purposes, I think you will need for a 2-hour practice, an hour preparation, just to sit down and think about what you will do and how it will work out. But it might be different. It might be different for you guys. I don't know.
But I agree. Let me just follow up with that, and then I'll let you jump in, Julio, because I agree with you, because I loved August's but he showed this is how easy you could practice plan. and it's not, I wanted to kind of balance the ease of the technical part with the aspect of the actual coaching part, that it's important. So I appreciate that. And then I'll let Julio step in and
I
Come.
wanted to say two things. One is the uh, the transformation of being somehow I think I knew everything coach to a more organized coach, and a lot of it came from the mentorship of Christian. You know, spending so much time with Christian for approximately 5-6 years or more. You know, working together. Me being shadow to him, right? And the influence of that methodology, you know, into becoming such a methodical, you know, coach by osmosis, by learning from how organized and everything he was. In fact, I actually have a presentation that in fact was inspired by somehow planning that in which I dissected everything that we did leading to world championship. But what I wanted to say is that if you look at the performance formula, you know, it's all about that. It's about clarity. You know, it's like if you as a coach are not organized, if you as a coach have not taken the time to actually explain to an athlete what you spend from, what are your expectations. So then how can you have a successful program if you don't have clear objective? So clarity plus ability plus motivation, you know, which 100% of the clarity, it is your responsibility. Then the ability, which is 50%, you still are part of it. You still have to provide them with tools, with organized practices, with a lot of, you know, plan-based practices are based on everything that you said and based on their abilities. And then 99% of the responsibility falls, of the motivation falls on the athlete. But at the end of the day, if you want someone to perform, if you want an athlete or a team to perform, you have to be prepared. And I think planning plays an important a role on that. You have to show up to the practice. And I will say it, I coach LA. And I was that coach where, you know, like at least I have a little piece of paper, but most of the practices were on the fly because you never knew who was going to show up. As I became a more sophisticated coach, then things started to improve. But it's about that. It's about like, how can you have them to perform if you don't know what the objective of the practice are going to be?
And I think it's gaining also the respect of your players.
Right.
I think the more prepared you arrive and the more you seems to know what you're talking about, you know, and that you're providing the right guidance to them, and eventually that they get some success and they find a way to play better. I think it also earned their trust, and you can go a lot further after that.
I agree with that. I agree with that completely. Thank you, Christian. I very much appreciate your time today with us.
No problem. Good
Thank
job,
you.
guys.
Thanks.
Mm.
Julio, we'll go right into the final part.
That's the last one. Yes.
Yes, this is the last one and it's non-curriculum. So it's just some Julio taking over. I'll let you take over and discuss. Thanks, Julio.
Give us a minute so I can share my screen. Oh, this one is still on. Sorry about that, guys. Oh, what's going on here? My bad. Give me 1 minute.
We are at the end of 14 hours of lecturing. We're coming off the wheels are coming off. We're good. Let's finish strong. We did good.
Yes.
Thanks, Julio.
A short one and easy one. So we call this presentation "What's Next?" You know, for all of us, because this is the first step in a long journey, in a journey that is for all of us, not just for Craig and for me, for the head coaches of the national team, for USATH Handball. This is a journey that we hope that we can continue at least once a year. If it's not once a year, every 2 years, because there has to be a follow-up. We have not done our job if we cannot provide you guys with a follow-up to what we're doing today here and what we have tried to accomplish through the weekend. Part of it is in a sense based on the fantastic curriculum that Craig is developing for the IHF and everything that he's working on. So we wanted to make sure that there's actually a platform for you guys to continue learning from the perspective of an athlete, from the perspective of an administrator, from the perspective of a coach, and so forth, because the overall development of the sport in our country is a task for every one of us. Okay, so what's next? What's going to happen next? I'll let Craig summarize what was the actual aim of the symposium, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more.
Well, the aim of the symposium was to create a foundation for further player development. It was to provide necessary information to develop the sport. And this is important that we Julio and I really care about developing the sport in the United States. Like I sit up at night thinking about how can I help develop the sport? How many schools can I get it into? How can I develop curriculum? It matters to us. And not just because we're selfish and we're national team players and we want this huge pool. So, and then it's to create understanding of the modern training basics to assist with overall improvement of the athletes and teams and the parallelism to better quality competition. Again, focused on quality, the importance of early training with the use of the correct methodology to develop players and to provide tools for those athletes learning the sport at a later stage in their life and provide a holistic approach to athletes development.
I think that summarizes everything.
Yes.
It's beautifully said. It captures everything that we have intended with this 2 days series of presentations. At an organizational level, we want to provide information and guidance for clubs and programs to achieve competition excellence, there's a parallel process to the development. The more development we have, at a club level, the better the competitions will be. And then we can transfer those skills and that level of competition to the international success that we want. I think everybody in this community wants the U.S. to become a powerhouse. I think that's the hope of the entire continent. That is the hope of the IHF. That is the hope of the entire handball community, because of how can we actually be, the fact that how we can influence the development of the sport in the entire continent. Provide a standard for selection to national teams and high level competition. It was important for us to let you know how we feel about selection, how Christian, how Robert, how Craig, how I feel about the type of players that we want, because at the end of the day, the only reward that we have right now in our programs are that representing the US. So we want to let you know what is it that it takes for you to wear that jersey. Okay. Provide resources and ideas to develop a sustainable program. This is why we want Colleen in. This is why we want August to be part of this, because we want the tools for you guys to succeed, to make sure that your programs are organized, that your programs are taking the steps in the right direction. Okay. Increase the efficiency of the programs and create an environment comparable to develop NGBs and other sports. We don't want to be USATH Handball anymore. We want to be USATH Handball. We want to be competing with USA Soccer. We want to be competing with USA Basketball. We want to be, so proud that we can say, what, our sport, just like it happened in Rio, was the most, after soccer, it was the one with the second highest attention. It was the second highest attendance in the Olympic Games. So we want to be there in that group, okay? And also to form an integrative approach to the development of the sport through understanding of our ADM, which is basically what we're trying to aim and organize athlete development methodology, not just for the success of the program, but also for the success of the competition here in the continental United States. Now, what's next? This is a starting point, as I said. We need to understand where we are in our development, okay? And we need to create an infrastructure to provide consistent development to athletes and coaches. We need consistency, and this is what we lack. We want to make sure that all of us are working toward the same goal. Some of us are ahead of the game. Some of us are in the intermediate phases of the game. Some of us are, in the inception or developing. We want to make sure that we go from developing to rebuilding. Okay, so we can actually provide, once again, quality training sessions, quality competition for all of us. Okay, and lastly, to provide ongoing quarterly education. Like I said at the very beginning of this presentation, if we don't continue with this, we are going to circle back to where we were before. Now it is Craig and I's responsibility and USATH Handball responsibility to continue with this, to find ways, to find grants, to find the opportunities for us to continue what we're trying to achieve. Okay, now here's a projected plan. This is what we envision. This is what everybody will want to see, and this is what this is our Craig and I's dream in terms of how we move forward with this. It's the inception of the ADM, okay, the Athlete Development Model. We want to make sure that we create an ADM for the entire program, not just for those who wants to become elite athletes, but for those who eventually will become handball for life, like I am. Someone who learned the sport, but it was never to compete at the highest level. Nonetheless, I became a handball for life person through college, through college playing, through involvement with the clubs, and through coaching national team clubs and national team programs. The ADM and the coaching development model as well, to support us with achieving athletic and coaching excellence. I am a product of coaching education. I believe in coaching education. I believe that there's a parallel process. Better coaches, better athletes, better teams, better competition. So all of us have to work together, in becoming better versions of ourselves. Okay, now how can we achieve this? Basically, to application of a USATH Handball athlete development course curriculum. This is what Craig and I have been working on. This is what I think Craig have done a fantastic job, in developing something for us. An application of USA Continental Federation as well, the North American Central Handball Confederation program, as well as the IHF coaching curriculum, okay? Because we want to make sure that we can develop a certification process that starts with a national level or NGB level that promotes to a continental level, and then from the continental level can go to the global level through the IHF, just like Europe and other continental federation have. We want to emulate what the European Handball Federation has. We want to make sure that in order for you to coach in the US, you have to be certified, or at least working through certification. Minimum, if you are going to be coaching at a league level, you have to have a license to coach at a league level. And then if you want to be a coach in a national team and juniors and youth categories, you have to have minimum, a continental certification. And then eventually, if you want to jump into coaching internationally, you have to have something that is equivalent to IHF license. So, and what's important is that we're trying to do this all in alignment to what the trends are at the USOC and at the International Federation. So this is basically what we want to do. We don't know the timelines for it. I can tell you right now that we're working on it, that Craig and I and Sarah Gascon help us through in crafting a future program that is very close, is really nearby, so we can continue working with this. And if USATH Handball allows us to continue working with this process, I think Craig and I are in for life. So that's basically in a nutshell what we tried to accomplish this weekend. I have nothing else to say other than thank you guys for going through all this, for staying away from your family during the weekend. And I will let Craig and Melissa say a few more words, and without any compromise. And I just want to let you know that thank you for your time and for being receptive to our experiences as coaches.
I just want to say how much I appreciate the effort put in by the coaches that stayed through the material and stayed through the course. This is a overview, and this is something that is really important to discuss and see, because we need you to see what you can gain by focusing on your education. And it's really important. And I want to also thank Julio for putting in the hard work of collaborating with our organization to get this to happen. And I want to thank Melissa and Emily for the support. We cannot do this without the support of our two full-time employees, because they are awesome. And as an organization that's never had high functioning support staff, you guys are great, and it's really wonderful to have. And I want to thank the panelists that joined us. It was really important for us to bring in expertise and particular viewpoints from people in the field. And it was great to have all of our guests prepare material and to be part of this process. And so that's all I have to say. I just want to say thank you. I know it's been a long weekend. I think it's been great, and I really appreciate everyone's focus and attention on the material. It's been awesome.
Melissa, before you jump in, I want to thank you. I want to personally thank Patrick Jalaber, because he kind of like spearheaded this process. He's one of the members of the USATH Handball board, and he raised that flag and raised a hand and said, guys, if we want to do something, we have Julio and Craig. And I think that's how everything started rolling. And then Melissa jumped in as well. And I just wanted to make sure that I thank you, Patrick, for doing this for us.
Definitely. I mean, Julio and Craig, you summed up almost everything I was going to say in terms of just thanking everyone for being here. But, the amount of work and time that went into both of your ends of this is astounding. And so I've seen the passion and energy from your end, and we as an organization are just so grateful to have you as a part of USA Team Handball and as phenomenal ambassadors for us. So thank you both for taking an entire weekend to educate and inform us. It means a lot. And yeah, just great symposium. I really enjoyed it, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And with that note, we should let everybody go, because we have a few hours left of the weekend. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll have these recorded, and they'll be posted on our YouTube channel. So you can always go back and rewatch them or share them with people who weren't able to attend this weekend. This will be more evergreen content. So yeah, really excited to have this for future months and years as well.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Take care, everyone.